we interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage, the Cowardly Dog. Abandoned as a pup, he was found by Muriel, who lives in the middle of nowhere with her husband, Eustace Bagg. But creepy stuff happens in nowhere. It's up to Courage to save his new home. Stupid dog, you made me look bad.
Courage the Cowardly Dog has always stood apart in the world of cartoons. Premiering in 1999 and running into the early 2000s, it aired during a golden era of Cartoon Network, a time where shows like Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo, and the Powerpuff Girls dominated the airwaves. Those shows leaned heavily on comedy, parody, or action, but Courage was something else entirely. It was a show about fear, about the grotesque, about the surreal and uncanny. It was horror packaged in a way that somehow still passed as a kid's cartoon, but anyone who grew up with it remembers the truth. Courage was never really for kids. In this video, we're gonna break down what made Courage the Cowardly Dog so terrifying, why it resonated so deeply with viewers, and how it managed to sneak such heavy themes into the world of children's television. The first thing that makes Courage unique is its setting. Nowhere, Kansas. An endless, barren wasteland where a single farmhouse sits surrounded by miles of desert. The show could have taken place in a bustling city or a quirky town or even a magical land, but instead, it placed its characters in complete isolation. That choice alone changes everything. Isolation is inherently frightening. It strips away safety nets. If something goes wrong, there's no help, no community, no escape, just you and the desert. Nowhere acts almost like a character itself. The landscape is empty, but it never feels peaceful, it feels hostile. It amplifies the uncanny. The monsters don't have to come from another world, they can just wander in from the desert. That's scarier because it suggests that evil, absurdity, and terror are lurking just beyond the horizon. It's also deeply symbolic. The farmhouse is a metaphor for the human condition. We live in our own little bubbles, our homes, our families, and our routines, surrounded by an infinite and different universe, and sometimes that universe sends things our way that we can't explain. For children, that sense of nowhere translates into the fear of being alone or abandoned. For adults revisiting the show, it reads as existential dread, the idea that we're small, isolated, and ultimately powerless in the face of a vast, uncaring reality. Courage is the perfect protagonist for this world. On the surface, he's a nervous wreck. He screams, trembles, and faints constantly. He hides under beds and in closets. His fear is exaggerated to the point of comedy, but the emotion is real. We don't admire Courage because he's fearless. We admire him because he's terrified and he acts anyway. Every single episode follows this formula. Something horrifying threatens his home, Courage is overwhelmed with fear, but he still finds a way to protect Muriel. That's why his name matters so much. It's ironic. He's cowardly, yet his cowardice highlights his true bravery. The show redefines what courage means. Courage isn't the absence of fear, courage is love in action. It's putting someone else before yourself, even when you're shaking in terror. This makes Courage one of the most relatable protagonists in children's animation. Unlike superheroes or action stars, he doesn't have powers. He doesn't even really win in traditional ways. He improvises. He solves problems through creativity, trickery, or sheer luck. He screams the entire way through, but he never abandons Muriel. And it's important to note that his love for Muriel isn't just a gimmick, it's the emotional backbone of the show. Without her kindness, Courage would crumble. She gives him strength and purpose. His every act of bravery is rooted in the fear of losing Muriel, which makes the show's horror resonate on a much deeper level. Muriel and Eustace are more than just supporting characters. They're essential to the show's themes. They represent two poles of human behavior, kindness and cruelty. Muriel is warmth, compassion, and stability. She's Courage's safe space. In a world full of grotesque monsters and terrifying creatures, Muriel is the only constant. Her Scottish accent, her gentle demeanor, the way she cradles Courage when he's afraid, she embodies unconditional love. Her presence is what makes the horror tolerable. If Courage were alone, the show would be unbearable, but because he has someone to protect, his fear becomes meaningful. Muriel gives him a reason to act. Eustace, on the other hand, is the embodiment of cruelty and indifference. He's selfish, greedy, and often the cause of the family's problems. He mocks Courage relentlessly, calling him a stupid dog, and even when Courage saves the day, Eustace rarely acknowledges it. But here's the thing. Eustace's cruelty grounds the show. It reminds us that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones outside, they're the people closest to us. His neglect and verbal abuse are a more realistic kind of horror, one many children sadly relate to. The trio's dynamic is simple but powerful. Courage acts out of love for Muriel and frustration with Eustace. Muriel is the glue that holds them together, and Eustace represents the coldness of the world, a foil to Courage's love and Muriel's kindness. Together, they form a strange but balanced family unit, and that family is what makes the nightmares of Nowhere worth enduring.
Return the slab.
If there's one line from Courage the Cowardly Dog that is burrowed into the collective subconscious of anyone who grew up watching Cartoon Network in the early 2000s, it's that. Just hearing those words delivered in that low, echoing monotone can send a chill down your spine, even today. At face value, King Ramses' curse is a standard ghost story. Muriel and Eustace find an ancient slab while going about their business. It's obviously valuable and just as obviously stolen from its restful resting place. A spectral figure, King Ramses himself, appears to demand its return, but Eustace, greedy as always, refuses, and from that moment, a series of curses descend upon the farmhouse. On the surface, it's a cautionary tale about greed, but what makes this episode legendary and why it has stayed with so many people for decades is the atmosphere. The character design of Ramses himself is infamous. Unlike every other character in Courage, Ramses is animated entirely in early CGI. He's rigid, stiff, and completely out of place in the 2D world of Courage, and that's exactly why he works. He looks wrong. As kids, we couldn't articulate it, but we knew something about Ramses didn't belong. That uncanny valley effect taps into a very primal sense of unease. The animation choice wasn't a limitation, it was a creative decision. By making Ramses so visually alien, the show was quietly telling us, this isn't just another villain of the week, this is something older, stranger, and more powerful than anything Courage or his owners have ever faced. The episode also makes heavy use of silence. Long stretches are filled only with the sound of wind or the low hum of Ramses' voice echoing across empty space. There's very little music, and that absence amplifies the fear. Unlike most kids shows, which throw around sound effects and score at every moment, Courage trusted the silence to do the work, and it does. On a deeper level, the curses themselves carry weight. Each one is symbolic, not random. The plagues that fall upon the farmhouse, flooding, locusts, unbearable noise, mirror biblical punishments, framing Ramses as less of a cartoon ghost and more of an ancient force of judgment. Eustace's refusal to return the slab even as his life falls apart represents human stubbornness and greed in its purest form. He'd rather suffer than admit he was wrong or give up what he perceives as wealth, and that's what makes the ending so powerful. Courage doesn't defeat Ramses, he can't. All he can do is survive long enough for Eustace's own arrogance to be his undoing. That's another hallmark of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The villains are rarely beaten in the traditional sense. Courage doesn't destroy them or banish them permanently, he endures them, he resists. Sometimes, like in King Ramses' Curse, it's not even his victory, it's Eustace's downfall that ends the horror. King Ramses' Curse wasn't just an episode of a weird dog cartoon, it was a ghost story that reached into myth, morality, and the deepest parts of our imagination, and reminded us that some horrors are not meant to be defeated, only survived. If King Ramses' Curse was remembered for its atmosphere, Freaky Fred is remembered for its character, and what a character he is. Fred isn't a ghost, he isn't a monster, an ancient curse, or an alien from another dimension, he's human, and that's what makes him terrifying. Fred is Muriel's nephew, introduced to us as a nice boy who just happens to be a little unusual. He's pale, thin, dressed in prim, old-fashioned clothes, and he smiles way too much. He stares a little too long. From the first frame, you know something is off, and then he starts talking. Fred speaks in calm, deliberate rhymes. His voice is steady, melodic, almost sing-song like a nursery rhyme, but the content of his words, obsession, compulsion, a fixation on cutting hair. Fred describes himself as naughty. Not dangerous, not evil, but naughty. The choice of that word is chilling because it suggests innocence, like a child who knows they're misbehaving but doesn't grasp the severity. On the surface, Fred is just a barber who can't resist shaving people bald, but the episode's framing and the intensity of his obsession make it very clear this is an allegory for deeper compulsions. Some people on the internet have read Fred as a representation of cupcake behavior, others as a metaphor for mental illness, particularly obsessive-compulsive disorder. Hey, I have that. His rhyming narration sounds almost like an internal monologue, a brain caught in a loop it can't escape. But no matter how you interpret it, the effect is the same. Fred is a human face for something that just feels wrong. Unlike Ramses, who embodies supernatural judgment, Fred embodies everyday horror. He's not otherworldly, he's someone you could run into in real life, and that makes him far scarier. The entire episode is structured as Fred's narration. We see events mostly from Courage's perspective, but everything is filtered through Fred's voice. His calm rhymes are paired with slow zoom-ins, lingering shots, and unsettling close-ups. The pace is suffocating. There's no relief, no comic relief gag to break the tension. Even the humor, when it appears, is uncomfortable. Fred is polite, well-mannered, and cheerful. He doesn't act like a villain, he acts like he's happy to be there, and that cheerful politeness, contrasted with his actions, is exactly what makes him terrifying. The climax where Fred finally corners Courage is deeply unsettling. He pins Courage down, raises the clippers, and shaves him bald while narrating with glee. Courage isn't harmed physically, but the violation is clear. It's invasive, it's humiliating, and it's presented without violence, without gore, and without the usual tools of horror. Just a slow realization that Fred enjoys what he's doing, and nothing can stop him. But Freaky Fred pales in comparison to The Mask. This episode stands out immediately because of its tone. It doesn't feel like a cartoon at all, it feels like a parable, a story so raw and unsettling that even as kids, we sensed it was about something bigger, something we didn't fully understand yet. The story begins when a mysterious figure arrives at Courage's farmhouse. She wears a large, white porcelain mask covering her entire face. She calls herself Kitty, and from the start, she's angry, aggressive, and hostile. She lashes out at Courage and his family, accusing Courage of being evil and declaring that all dogs are cruel. But beneath her hostility is something else: fear. We eventually learn that Kitty is running from her abusive boyfriend, a dog named Mad Dog, who treats her with cruelty and violence. The mask, then, is more than a disguise, it's armor, it's how she hides her pain. This is where the episode's true darkness lies. The mask isn't about jump scares or curses, it's about the cycle of abuse. Kitty's hatred for dogs is really projection, a way of justifying her suffering by turning it into prejudice. By hiding behind the mask, she distances herself from trauma, but never truly escapes it. This is an incredibly heavy subject matter for a children's cartoon. We're not just watching Courage fight another monster, we're watching a victim struggle with identity, trust, and survival. The brilliance of the writing here is that it never says these things outright. As kids, we didn't know what abuse meant in a psychological sense, but we understood the feeling. We could tell something was wrong, and we could sense that Kitty wasn't really angry at Courage, she was angry at what happened to her. The mask itself is one of the most striking images in the entire series. Blank, pale, expressionless. It hides everything human about Kitty, and in a way, that's what abuse does. It strips away your ability to express yourself freely. You become a version of yourself that's shaped entirely by fear. When Kitty finally takes off the mask, it's a moment of vulnerability. We see her face, her emotions, and her humanity. It's a signal that she's beginning to trust Courage, and more importantly, that she's beginning to trust herself again. As always, Courage is the silent witness. He doesn't speak much, but he understands, he listens, and when the time comes, he helps Kitty confront Mad Dog. What's important here is that Courage doesn't defeat Mad Dog in the way he defeats other villains. There's no big showdown, no grand gesture. Instead, he helps Kitty reclaim her agency to stand up for herself. This episode remains one of the most important in the series because it tackles something no other children's cartoon would dare touch at the time: the reality of abuse. It used metaphors, symbolism, and horror to not scare us for fun, but to introduce us in a way we could understand to the idea that the world can be cruel in ways that aren't fantastical. The episode Perfect is one of the few times that the show pulls back the curtain and reveals Courage's deepest internal struggle: anxiety. The episode begins with Courage once again trying to live his simple life in the farmhouse, but as usual, everything he does goes wrong. His chores, his mannerisms, even just existing seems to irritate Eustace, who mocks him relentlessly. Eventually, this ridicule manifests into something new, a figure known only as the Perfectionist. She appears as a tall, almost alien-looking woman with sharp features and a harsh voice. She tells Courage that everything he does is wrong, his walk is wrong, his speech is wrong, his entire being is flawed, and she insists that she will train him until he becomes perfect. From this point on, the entire episode becomes an allegory for insecurity. Courage is bombarded with criticism, told to repress his natural instincts, and forced into a cycle of self-doubt. What's so haunting about this episode is the fact that the Perfectionist doesn't have any supernatural powers. She doesn't need them. Her weapon is her words. She embodies the voice inside all of us, the voice that says, "You're not good enough, you'll never measure up, and everyone can see your flaws." This is the voice of every strict teacher, every disappointed parent, and every bully. And Courage, who has always been defined by his bravery in the face of external threats, suddenly can't fight back because this isn't an external threat, it's internalized. In the middle of the episode, Courage experiences one of the most surreal and symbolic sequences in the entire show. He dreams of a wise blue fish, and the fish speaks to him in cryptic languages, but its message is simple: nobody is perfect. This moment is striking because it's the only time in the entire show that Courage receives direct reassurance that his flaws are okay. The fish represents acceptance, balance, and wisdom, a reminder that perfection is an illusion and that striving for it will only cause suffering. For many fans, this dream sequence is one of the most important scenes in the series because it's the rare instance where Courage's constant anxiety and self-doubt are directly addressed. It's the show speaking not to just Courage, but to us, the audience. By the end of the episode, the Perfectionist becomes more aggressive, her demands more impossible. Courage tries harder and harder, but nothing satisfies her, and finally, he reaches a breaking point. He stops trying to please her and rejects her demands, and with that rejection, she disappears. Courage learns, as we do, that perfection is unattainable. The pursuit of it is a prison, and the only way out is to accept yourself as you are. It's fitting that Perfect was the final episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The show didn't end with Courage defeating a great villain or saving the world or even conquering his external fears. It ended with him confronting his inner fears, the ones that no amount of bravery can ever truly silence. And that's why Perfect stands out as not only one of the best Courage episodes, but one of the most profound pieces of storytelling in children's animation, because it dared to tell us something that most shows never will. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be you. Courage the Cowardly Dog wasn't just a scary cartoon. It blended horror with humor, grotesque with tender, and despair with love, and in doing so, it created a show that stuck with its audience long after the credits rolled. The farmhouse in nowhere may have felt terrifying as a kid, but looking back, we realized it wasn't just about monsters. It was about the way fear shapes us, the way love drives us forward, and the way even the smallest, most anxious among us can rise to the occasion when it matters most. Courage wasn't just a cowardly dog, he was every one of us, staring into the unknown, afraid but never giving up. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you liked it, and even if you didn't like it, dude, just dislike for me. Like, that's okay, bro. As long as it's engagement, it's good for the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for the support on the recent videos. They're going actually crazy. We're almost at 1,000 subs already. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, this video took me a whole lot of time, so if you guys could drop a sub in the video, that would mean the world to me. Share it with your friends, if you got friends. If you don't got friends, then, I don't know, maybe, like, rewatch it. I'm joking. Don't do that. That would be actually torture to rewatch the same video. I'm yapping. I'm gonna go now. Thank you guys so much for everything. I love you very much. Good night. Don't let the bed bugs. Bye.